Okay. We will begin with Mr. Sandrock, your opening comments.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Commissioners. I wanted to start by thanking Gordon and his staff for another successful budget process and for navigating us through our first two-year budget process. This year, as we all know, was largely a focus on the review of operations and service levels, taking a really long look at some of the things that we've done over the last few years, especially the outsourcing initiatives and whether our goals were met. And we had several workshops around that. One of the things that I'm most proud of, and I wanted to mention tonight, was the work around our insurance, health insurance, moving to being self-insured, improvements to the health clinic, and also thanks to the employees for embracing the wellness program concept. All of these items resulted in a 0% increase in health insurance for next year. Prior years, it was not uncommon for us to be experiencing an increase in the 20% plus range. So again, really significant accomplishment. Last item is some breaking news this week regarding the IAFF grievance arbitration, and this was related to reinstating the COLA and the educational increases. We got the arbitrator's ruling, which was in favor of the union's position. We've done some preliminary analysis regarding the financials. It looks like for the first year, from October 1st, 2011 to the end of this fiscal year, we're talking about something in the $800,000 range. And again, that's for this year. So that's something that we weren't able to get into the public hearing for tonight. We will work to have that finalize that a little bit more for the second public hearing.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Skidmore.
Mr. Sandrock, with that news, that means that retroactively the only bargaining unit in the entire county that will receive any increased compensation would be that unit?
Yes, sir.
And that where that unit's that's retroactive from 10/1 of 11 through 9/30 of 12, which is the end of this month.
Correct.
Moving forward, though, we are bargaining with that unit or have set impasse with that unit. Is that correct?
We are at impasse.
Would it be, I mean, I find it highly objectionable that that unit would be treated any differently than any other unit or any non-bargain employee in this organization or any employee in our sheriff's office, our clerk's office, our tax appraiser's office, and or our collector's office, and our supervisor of elections. So I would hope that this board would at least send a letter asking that unit for the safety, for the sake and welfare of the county's financial health to forego any compensation that would treat them any differently than any other employee in this organization. I find it appalling and objectionable that they want to be treated differently and feel there's some specialness to what they do over the men and women that serve this organization, this county, in any other form or fashion.
And so you're asking for consensus to have Mr. Sandrock write a letter, or?
I think the board should. I mean, and this is only for this piece. This is not for anything with impasse. So, but I don't see how, in good conscience, you can go to sleep at night. I think it's about a 10% increase if you add all the steps together. Is that right?
The COLA is a 3% increase based upon your anniversary date of employment.
And the education benefits?
The educational increases are, there's two separate 2% increases for meeting certain educational criteria.
Which is stackable, correct?
3 credit, correct.
So
a total of 7%.
I find it hard to go to sleep at night knowing that there are others in this organization that have foregone for 5 years, that this commission has worked very hard to make sure that we've treated every employee fairly, and most important, been consistent in that treatment, and that we've made sure that we've made the hard cuts. We've all, for the past 4 years, I know those of us that have been here have taken pay decreases each and every year. And I'm not complaining about that because I believe in service with sacrifice, but I do find it highly objectionable that one unit wants a 7% increase over others and continues that inequity in our system and our structure. And as I look out into the audience tonight, I see the men and women that we're greeting each and every day. I have a hard time explaining to them why we can't give them a 7% increase. And I know that Sheriff-elect Permel has already agreed to work with this board, I believe, and have the same as Sheriff Cameron did, and have the same compensation variances that we have. In starting out tonight with a 7% compensation increase for a few hundred employees that already have scheduled overtime versus those that don't have scheduled overtime, and our utility workers who go out on the holidays, and our public works workers, and you know, everyone else that works with the public each and every day. I have a hard time going to sleep at night, and I'm not going to unless we ask for them to voluntarily forego that, and I think the public should do the same.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Duffy.
Thank you. So, Mr. Sandrock, this is a decision that was made by the judge, the arbitrator. Is that true? And does he have the final decision?
He does. It was an arbitrator. It's a non-binding decision.
And what exactly?
You mean binding decision?
I'm sorry,
It's a
binding.
binding decision. Okay.
Yes.
It's those new Joe Madden glasses that are screwing me
Yes.
out, man.
So how do we handle this? I mean, at this late in the budget year, what do we say? What do we do? Do we have to? How are we going to pay for this? I mean, do we have to make budget cuts to compensate for this?
Well, two separate issues. First is the process of going back, because you really have to go back, you know, a full year to each employee, and when the anniversary date occurred and the education impacts, and that's an administrative exercise in itself. I guess to address, you know, how would we deal with this? This was not something that we had planned to use our reserves for. You know, we had planned to use our reserves for a longer-term strategy to deal with budget issues. So it would be, you know, we would have to go back and look at our prior type strategies to make up the difference.
Commissioner Deutsch.
Thank you. As I understand it, this is a result of something which we had discussed a year or so or more ago and was considered part of a contractual arrangement. I just sort of feel that I didn't hear Commissioner Skidmore present the issue the way I understood was the one that went before to get the decision. And maybe Ms. Knowlton could give us some background on exactly what happened and what precipitated it, so we're all on the same page.
I was
If
here.
you wouldn't mind doing that. I
here.
appreciate that. I'd like Ms. Knowlton to give us the background, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioners, I'm going to call Ms. Tetro up to give the details, but I can tell you it was a result of grievances that were filed by the union. We attempted at 2 different mediations to resolve it. We were unable to resolve it, and it went to binding arbitration. And this is the result. Special counsel wasn't able to obtain a different result.
And we reached binding arbitration when both parties couldn't come to an agreement on it. Is that correct?
Correct. We went through 2 mediation sessions.
Yeah, I'm not taking a position on either side, but the point was, the way, in all due respect to Commissioner Skidmore, the way it was presented, sort of, you know, it sort of sounded like, hey, that union's coming in and trying to hold us up for a salary increase, and, you know, I think if we objectively look at the history and the background, I see it a little bit different than that. You know, I don't like the idea of having to come up with an extra $750,000 that we didn't plan on a budget for, but, you know, in reality, we knew the issue was going to be questioned and came up, and we did. I think we had an opportunity where we could have resolved it one way or another, and we chose not to. And we knew it was going to binding arbitration, and we knew that whatever the court's decision would be, that we'd have to live by it, whether it was in favor of us or not in favor of us. But it's something that altogether we agreed to do. So I thought maybe we could get some background on, you know, what got us here. As long as we're going to discuss this, it would be helpful to everyone.
Well, before we do that, Commissioner Skidmore, do you have a comment?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, in all fairness, Commissioner Deutsch is something I probably know a little bit more about than you do, for once, because I was sitting up here in this chair along with Commissioner Starr and Duffy. It goes back to 2008, 2009 budget when Commissioner Starr vehemently, very passionately wanted to rein in the fire and EMS budget. And I believe in concert with that, he talked about privatization. There were three, maybe four commissioners at that time that wanted to do that. Understandably, the union skipped a beat in their step that day, and they quickly came in with concessions, and they truly were concessions. They were monetary concessions at that time. There were $6.5 million in scheduled overtime going to just your fire and EMS union, and I believe the report from the clerk's office showed that almost, if not all, firefighters were making well over $100,000 a year here in Charlotte County, not comparable with the men and women in the sheriff's office or any other public safety unit. So with those concessions, the board decided that out of all fairness, we would forego, I shouldn't say it was necessarily quid pro quo, but at that time, the decision to not privatize the EMS services was made, and there was an understanding that we would go to a bargaining time of 10/1 of 11. It's my understanding that the union did everything they could to stall through legal maneuvers, and that negotiation never occurred by 10/1 of 11, and that's why we're at impasse where we are today. Obviously, the county, our HR department, and this commission could not accept any and all the terms that were presented, and the union couldn't accept any of all our terms. I understand that, and I'll let that process play it out. But the unique part of that was by not actually going to contract on 10/1 of 11 of this year, the union decided they were going to grieve, and that the contract with the concessions that they were under was no longer okay. And they wanted to go, they being the union, wanted to go back to the contract that they had concessioned away from or conceded away from, which had a 7 to 10% increase, including anniversary, step, education benefits, which was the overall catalyst for the, I believe, and Commissioner Stott, I don't mean to speak for you, but I know for myself, was the catalyst for the wanting to have necessity to have to rein in a department that had $6.5 million in scheduled overtime. So when the union decided that the conditions that they worked under for 2 years was no longer acceptable to them, they decided to bargain for compensation from a contract which was now 2 to 3 years old. I did not see how anyone could understand that that would be okay, and they decided to file a grievance and go back, and obviously this is the grievance that they won. However, anyone that's been living in Charlotte County that hasn't, I don't think that's lived, under a rock for the past 4 years, has seen this commission cut over $100 million in ad valorem. They've watched your sheriff come in and say time and time again, we're not offering compensation, COLAs, anything. The Water Authority budget, which is just a microscopic part of our entire budget, and certainly is a heck of a lot less than this number that was presented to us tonight, this commission has vehemently combed over to make sure that there was no COLA increases, anniversary increases, any kind of compensation increase. We have brought in the health department to make sure that they haven't even thought about bringing in an increase. We have raked our constitutional officers, the clerk of the court, the property appraiser, the tax collector. We have raked them over the coals on television to make sure that they were not offering a compensation increase. And now we have one part of what's supposedly supposed to be part of a team, and most definitely is part of a public safety team, and the other part of the team that's sitting here tonight is not getting any kind of increase. Now we have one part of the team getting 7%. I don't see how anyone can say I'm presenting the story any differently. And I just gave you the historical knowledge. I gave you where we came from, where we're at today. And I hope where we go is that we all take the step together. No one gets raises. No one gets compensation stuff. And we look towards a future of tomorrow that may allow for something. But if you give 7% to one portion of this organization and others, you're going to create an inequity and a divide in this organization, in this community, that is far greater than the 7% for the few selected.
May I ask Mr. Skidmore a question? Because I appreciate it.
Do we not want to get the answer that you
Well,
have?
no, I think it's more appropriate now.
Okay, Commissioner Deutsch.
Wasn't there a point where they offered to withdraw that, and did we not turn it down? In other words, I sort of remember at some point that they were going to withdraw the grievance.
Mr. Chair, can I try to answer his question?
Well, I have an answer. I want to make sure on the advice of counsel I can answer that.
Well, the question is whether they ever tried to withdraw their grievance. I don't believe they ever withdrew their grievance.
No.
Well, I think if we start to get into that, we're probably overstepping our bounds on the impasse.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. And I'll be glad to answer your question after impasse, but extortion isn't something I'd like to practice either.